Okay, thank you. Without wasting time, let me give it a little bit of, let me be elaborative when I come to that. First of all, when it comes to Butterworth, let me give my audience a picture of Butterworth. Butterworth is operating in a rural setting, first of all, with at the time they had only 10 investigative officers, and you will understand that this is a specialized unit. By specializing, it means that you are an expert in the field. You are an expert in the field, and you are unlike those who are working at the police station, meaning general detectives at the police station. You're specializing in three main cases. Cases that involve rape, which is dominant in the area, and also cases that involve children, and also domestic violence. Those are the expectations. So as per the policy, and you look at East London had at least 16 detectives with the jurisdiction, when you look at the radius, which is way smaller than that of Butterworth. So I will just summarize these findings based on that. When you go to Butterworth, there was a frustration on the policy implementers, the people who are supposed to be doing the actual job. The frustration is mostly on the infrastructure of the areas they serve. They made, for example, when you drive from Butterworth, which is where their office is, and you go to Dutwa, you travel 35 kilometers. From Dutwa to Willowville, you travel 30 kilometers. And so is from Butterworth to Kendane, from Butterworth to Ngamakwe. Those are the only tarred road that they have. The rest, should you be off those roads, you are going to deep rural areas, roads that are not maintained. So that was their, in the findings, I found that they were very frustrated by the infrastructural situation, especially the roads. And also you will understand that in the rural areas, another thing that frustrates them, once it's dark, they cannot work because many areas, as much as they have lights, they have electricity, it's only limited to households. There are no street lights, and there are no roads between the houses, as compared to East London, wherein you find streets, street names. However, even in East London, the study found that even though the infrastructure in East London is better than in Butterworth, in East London, they do find problems when it comes to locating, especially the perpetrators, because most of the times people who are in our townships are moving around, and you may find a person in Duncan Village today, but this person is not necessarily from Duncan Village, it's from PE. And the people in the area don't even know the history of this individual. Unlike in the rural settings, the police of Butterworth were not having that problem much. But their problem is contrary to this one, because theirs, when perpetrators commit crime in the rural settings, they run away, whether to other rural areas or to mostly Cape Town. I'm sorry to the people of Cape Town, mostly areas like Cape Town, big cities, where they feel like, okay, you've done something in the rural areas and so forth. And another thing that I found, the resourcing in Butterworth is at a worrying state as compared to that one of East London. Even though in East London, they have 16 detectives, the study found that the detective who had many dockets there had plus minus 20 active dockets. While in Butterworth, the person who had minimum dockets to investigate was 70. So you can tell the difference, which shows that their frustration now on the side of Butterworth is that whenever they carry dockets, time is always against them, and the element of specializing is then compromised. So those are partly the findings of the study.
Thank you, Mr. Siwisa. What I'm finding from your research is that one's geographical location determines the kind of services they receive in this country. And of course, that dates back into our historical background as I was reading your thesis. So with these challenges, what were some of your recommendations in trying to mitigate the situation? Yes, we already have the infrastructure problem. Yes, this police station the resources are very low. But what then do we do in trying to make sure our people are safe while we're still waiting on government to provide enough resources and infrastructure?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Isa. I like the fact that you are saying while waiting, because as much as the study was concentrating on the implementation of FCS policy, it turned out on the findings that the most frustrating thing is not in the capacity of the South African Police Service to change. That is the unfortunate part, because they are operating in areas that they don't have resources to make roads. They don't have resources to change the situation of our rural settings. However, one of the recommendations that came out of the study is that if, at least in Butterworth, the number of detectives can at least be 20 at the time. The reason why I always say at the time, it is because that was at least 2 years back. If they can have at least more detectives in terms of the resources and more vehicles. And again, the issue of vehicles was not a problem only in Butterworth, even though it was worse in Butterworth than East London. So one of the recommendations is that there is what is called in the South African Police Services SAPS 108, which means it's wherein government gives a police officer resources to be safeguarded by that police officer 24/7, meaning that if it's a vehicle, if they would be borrowed vehicles, they must not book them back to the station and take their private vehicles and so forth, because it would save them time and have enough time to respond as prompt as possible to cases if they would have vehicles staying with them 24/7, and then means must be devised to ensure that they are utilized solely for that. That is one of the recommendations. And also, some of the issues were that the police officers, you understand that in our days, everything that we do, we must record. Even when they go to court, it's something that they have recorded. So it turned out that they do not have gadgets. So if at least FCS investigators can be given gadgets, so that they have their own laptops with 3G cards, each and everyone, they can even respond quickly in receiving the dockets at the police stations. And again, it's one of the things that was frustrating for them is that the reporting channels when it comes to cases, particularly of rape, is that it takes time for a case to come to the attention of the investigating unit called FCS. So that is another recommendation that came out of the study, that this is something that needs to be reviewed so that the reporting is directly from the victim and straight to FCS. And there were many recommendations. That is why you see me trying to chase time. And also, when you look at the issue of offices, the issues of offices, that is an infrastructure, at least that would be somehow, even not directly, be in the capacity and ability of the state called, in fact, South African Police Service, to at least provide these units with accommodation that is conducive enough for such sensitive cases. That is one of the things that the study found, that even the office doesn't give hope that you are in an office that carries dockets of this nature. That is another thing. I think those are but some of the recommendations the study imposed.
Thank you, Mr. Siwisa. Then my next question will be, with your main findings and recommendation, what other areas would you say other researchers need to tap into in trying to help the communities, the FCS department in mitigating these challenges, in terms of moving forward? That yes, you've researched on this part, but what are other areas that still need more depth in order for us to come up with a holistic approach in terms of our solutions?
I think there are plenty. First of all, Isa, let's appreciate platforms such as this, because this is a very sensitive topic in South Africa for honors level. Because I conducted the study at honors level, you will understand the limitation, the limit in terms of even how much of pages of the research and so on, the time that you have in conducting this research. I would love scholars to look into many matters. Yeah? For example, the resourcing itself is a matter of, it's a matter that needs to be researched more, not only limited to FCS, to all other institutions linked with this office. You'll understand that this office works directly with offices such as social development, offices such as NPA. Those are the stakeholders working with the office. And you will find situations wherein you go to the social development and social workers don't have vehicles. These are the issues that kill the fabric of our institutions, because our institutions don't exist in Bisho and Pretoria. They are given life by our people who are working the ground. And believe me, these are the people who have knowledge. You'll also, since you had a prerogative of reading the study, you'll understand that even the officers working for FCS are taken to courses, which is done adequately. I applaud it for the service for that. However, if then the resources do not match the caliber of the people we have, and they are overloaded, it becomes a problem. Another area that I think would also be expanded in the study is the number of female investigating officers in these institutions. That is another worrying factor, because you find in Butterworth there were many male investigators than females, and so is East London. That was then, but these are the areas that a person can also delve into. And also the livelihood of women in our rural settings. When you look at the reasons, perhaps even though it has not been researched, this is an assumption from my side, the reason rural areas have become vulnerable to cases such as rape, it's because we have elderly people who are residing with grandchildren while the mother of their grandchildren and parents of their grandchildren are busy looking for jobs and for economic survival in the urban settings. So criminals do understand these gaps. So there is also some gap to, in fact, some knowledge that can be developed in that space.
Thank you, Mr. Siwisa. I was just checking on our chat box. We have a question. Actually, it's two-folded. This is from Sinedise. Sinedise is asking, how does your study become relevant to South African civic human rights as a democratic values of the state? Secondly, why did you choose to compare cases from these two regions? The question is coming because you did not necessarily describe East London. So that's where is coming from with the question as to why did you compare these two regions? And also, how is your study contributing to the civic human rights for the democratic South Africa?
Hey, Stedis, that is so like you. Let me tackle the second one first, because the first one, you'll understand that is very complex. Snedise, when you look at the resourcing in South Africa at large, people are moving from rural areas to reside in the urban areas because they perceive urban areas to be well resourced as compared to rural areas. So when you look at East London, which is not so far from Butterworth, East London and Butterworth is 100 kilometers apart. So I concentrated on these two because there's not even a single town in between them. The other one is in the former Ciskei, and the other one is in the former Transkei. And when you look at also the nature, I would say how East London is organized, and you look at how Butterworth is organized. Butterworth has got towns that it serves, whereas East London, you would argue that it has got suburbs and fewer rural settings that it serves. In terms of the infrastructure, East London is predominantly urban, and you'd understand that for the police officer to execute his duties, especially investigating, he will need to drive to the victim, come back from the victim to look for witnesses. From witnesses, you go to, they will go then to look for the perpetrator after gathering all the information necessary to start looking for a perpetrator. So that is happening smoothly in East London as compared to Butterworth, because for Butterworth to travel from their office to the first rural area, it's time consuming. By the time they get to the next witness, already the time has lapsed, or they are receiving a call on another police station, which is a little bit far from there. So I chose these two because in terms of infrastructure, they differ, and because of our history of urban areas being prioritized as compared to our rural areas. The first question, which I have converted to be the second one. Obviously, the human rights, even though I didn't get into details of that because of the limitations I had, obviously, those are the other issues, I would say, because I don't want to be vague in answering this question. I want us as scholars in this platform to look into that. What then does it mean to our human rights? What does, how does the ineffectiveness, or how does lack of of resourcing in this institution provoke our own human rights, whether you are in the urban setting, whether you are in the rural areas. You remember that when we define a human being in South Africa, we don't say a human being residing in rural areas is blah, 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 and the one residing in the urban areas is blah, 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 blah. Human beings, as per our constitution, are equal in terms of opportunities and otherwise. So these are the areas that I would also urge the scholars in this platform to scientifically inquire on. I don't know if Snedise, you would be the first one to also assist me in there. I know you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siwisa. As we go back, we don't currently have a question. So I have certain questions that I have drafted on my own. As we go back into your research, you mentioned that South Africa is forms part of these treaties that are international. But also in your research, you mentioned that when the policy for FCS was implemented, it was nationalized. So for every police station, it was all the same. And I call that a uniform system or a one-size-fits-all system. And my question is, what are the shortfalls of this uniform system or one-size-fits-all, having looked at Butterworth and East London and understanding that they have a different geographical area, their environment is different, their resourcing is different. However, they are ruled with the same policy and they are expected to deliver in the same level.
Is that there is in a policy that is meant to address a problem that that you would say every geographical spread is experiencing. I don't believe that a uniform kind of a model is wrong. However, there is historic inequality in all areas. The policies are properly crafted. They speak directly to the problem. However, when it then comes to the implementation, the very key issue in implementing a policy, which is one of the key issues, would be resources. It feels like it's taking a back seat now, and whenever even you'd see it not only in areas such as FCS, even in other institutions, you'll notice that the monitoring and evaluation and so forth is the same, is similar. If principal offices are visiting these offices, they expect the quality of investigation to be the same, whereas the infrastructure is not the same. So these are the problems that come from that uniform policy. The policy itself is not wrong, but what then is wrong is what gives life to the policy, which is how do we give it breath. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Again, when it comes to this policy, I'm looking at Gajane and other areas in Butterworth. And these areas are mostly ruled by traditional leadership and all of that.
Yes.
Do you think, from your understanding, firstly, that the people
I've lost you there.
Okay, I'm saying, Mr. Siwisa, with rural areas, I want to understand from your research, did you pick up an understanding from people, especially in rural areas, whether they understand the FCS policy, or were they involved in its implementation and drafting?
By people, you mean the participants?
Yes, the participants, not only police people, but also the general community, your people who at one point fall victim of the situation, understanding that communities, especially rural communities, are led by traditional authority. Were they involved, even traditional authorities, in this process of implementing this particular policy?
Let me be honest, because I'm answering based on the study here. The study didn't go as far as probing their involvement, because you'll understand when the policy is established in South Africa, there are protocols. I didn't go as far as that in my study. However, let me answer you based on the little information that came out of the study. When it comes to Butterworth, together with East London participants being police officers, they understand. I want to be unequivocal about that. They are best investigators that I have ever met, because I have met investigators before. So they understand, they have been trained, they understand what is expected of them. However, the areas they work on are different even because we are mostly, when we talk about FCS, we make a mistake of concentrating only on rape cases, but there is this crucial subcomponent in there, which is called child protection. The police officers in East London are working in an environment where parenting, because of many effects that I would also argue that is a gap for people to also investigate. The people in those areas have got a better understanding, or even support systems in understanding what is expected of a child, raising a child and so forth, and what laws are guiding the society to take care of children. In the rural areas, you'll understand that there are still areas where there are people, but where there are people who have suffered in terms of attending school, formal schooling, and so forth. And also the environment itself doesn't make an area a child-friendly area. So when incidents are happening in areas such as Willowvale in Dwesa area, for example, incident wherein a child is injured and so forth, it takes time for those cases to be reported as compared to urban settings. So those are the other issues that came out of the study. When you compare these two areas, the involvement then thereof of traditional leaders, they do get involved when it comes to investigation. They play a pivotal role when it comes to apprehending the criminals, especially the chiefs there in the rural areas. They assist the police officers in Butterworth, because at times, even in terms of the directions, the police do call the Royal House and ask for directions.
Thank you, Mr. Siwisa. My follow-up question would be, having grown up in a rural area myself, there's more often than not, when there's a rape case, there's a child abuse issue, there's always a notion of let's discuss it as a family. And that then puts the victim in a very detrimental position. My question is, what can we do as, what role can we play as young people, myself included, even though I don't have that background, in making sure that our communities have awareness about this policy? Because even myself, it was my first time hearing about the FCS, and I've had the engagement with a couple of my colleagues. It's the same issue. So there seems to be, I can't really say because of my friends don't know that people don't know about it, but there is that probability of a lot of people have, especially in rural setting, a lack of understanding of this policy, how does it protect them? And in this situation of the family saying we'll deal with it as a family, it becomes an issue because there are no channels, or rather they don't understand the channels of going about discussing these issues, even for the victim themselves.
Okay, let me give it to both the community. The South African Police Service, as per my knowledge, is very ordered. In the rural areas already, one of the innovations done by South African Police Services in our democratic dispensation is to have community-based forums that are called CPFs. These are the people who from time to time hold meetings with the police and hold meetings with the communities. And also at each and every police station, you'll find that there is a police officer who is charged with the responsibility of educating the community about these issues. What then needs to happen is for organizations that work around these issues, not to work in silos, not to work for popularity. If you have an organization in a community that advocates for the rights of women, we expect that organization to collaborate with SAPS, with CPFs, and any other people or an organization or an agency that shares similar ideas or ideology or revolution, whatever you may call it. So for people to know, they need to be taught. And if you teach a person once, then you're making a mistake. It must be brought into our daily conversation so that we understand the channels, we understand what must be done. Some areas you find young women who do not even know what they must do when they have been raped. Some areas you find parents who do not know that leaving a child who is at a certain age alone at night and going to your party and so forth is wrong. So for people to know these things, they need to be taught. And already there is on the side of South African Police Service, police officers who are employed and charged with the responsibility to do that. So our role and responsibility as a society is to also organize ourselves and invite those people to constantly remind us of these ever-changing laws.
Thank you, Mr. Siwisa. My last question before I move to the other part will be based on what on someone on Mill that you quoted on your research, that it is common belief in rural areas of Transkei that rape is underreported. It is, for example, estimated that for every 36 rapes, only one is reported. And if this estimate is valid, then Mthatha region properly has the highest burden of rape in the world. And my question then will be, the issue again we've highlighted is infrastructure, it's all these other problems that we've highlighted, and you've just mentioned of the role that we can play in addressing that. Now, going back to the way our society is structured is that parents sometimes don't want kids to be taught about these things. What would be your message to parents in allowing both organizations and school in teaching them about issues of rape, issues of sexual violence, issues of sex in the holistic manner? Because sometimes people don't understand the bordering lines between consensual sex and non-consensual sex, because again, there's silence around the discussion of sexual activities on their own.
Oh, okay, Issa, thanks for this question. You know, Issa, I don't know. This was said by Ubizo in one of these sessions. He was alluding to issues relating to what you are talking about. I can't remember how exactly, but let me just go straight. When we think that in the rural areas there is poor parenting, I think we'll be making a wrong assumption. One of the things that came with our democracy is the confusion when it comes to our parents of the role they must play to nurture their children. As a result, they don't know when to say no. They don't know when to say yes. They don't know how to say no. They don't know how to say yes. Remember, we're talking about people who predominantly come from where they were taught by their parents on how to wake up, how to do A, B, C, D, and when to come back home. What time do the lights switch on and so forth. I think it starts there. If that confusion is not clarified, we will forever be having this question. That's the first thing that I want to say. So if the issue of ingqeqesho is still so confusing in the rural areas, because some of the cases that are reported or even not reported, they emanate from this breakage that is in the family itself, who tells who what to do what. You find families where children do as they please. You find families where parents are so harsh to an extent that the child, even when this child got raped, this child is not going to easily communicate to the parent. So these are other issues that each and every household must look into. And especially female children, their whereabouts must be known. Their whereabouts must be known. When your child is exiting your gate, you need to know who is she with, where is she going, what time must you expect her to come back. In our days, we have cell phones. Who are you going with? Can I have the cell phone number of that person? Those are the other issues. And also, unfortunately, in our rural areas, there are no playgrounds. Children play as andongeni nagupi nagupi. Those problems still, we hardly have even a sound advice for them. You can't tell children not to be children, not to play. And the structure of our rural areas, unfortunately. So this is a call to the leaders that at least try to close this gap. Let the children who are in the rural areas feel that there are also children playgrounds, because it is easier to monitor them when they are playing together there, other than them playing wherever they please. So that is my call to the entire society, because leaders are parents. They must devise necessary resources in the rural areas, as they would also love their children to enjoy.
Thank you, Mr. Siwisa. But on the other side, I understand where you're coming from, where you're saying female kids or girls must be known where they are. But shouldn't we switch our focus from female to males? Because in half the time, the perpetrators are males. So shouldn't our focus be switched to the other side of the coin, rather than giving victims a burden to always constantly be looking over their shoulders?
Thank you, Isa. Thank you very much. You know, there is a notion that has become our culture. Nay, boys are left to come back home even at 12 o'clock as they please, and so on. So there is no control. And it is inculcated in their minds that they are dominating. The masculinity is enforced, is taught at a very young age. So I would say is we need to have leadership as adults wherein we are able to talk or create platforms to teach our young men how to conduct themselves, how to be future husbands and leaders. But there is no such. Again, I want to say, it goes back to this issue that we as rural people have been stripped off. And if we do not concentrate on this, we'll forever have hooligans. Parents are confused, Isa. I don't want to lie. They are confused. They don't know what is right. They don't know what is wrong. And as much as it has been there before that boys were not taught, that is not entirely true. But how they are taught now, today, you find boys whose fathers cannot even talk to because they are scared of them. And who are those boys going to listen to if they don't listen to their own fathers? We need to have a talk with them at a tender age so that they grow to be future better men. However, how do we do it if we are still in a country or in a society that is confused between what is of our own and what is imposed to us? That is another question that I pose to scholars out there.
Thank you, Mr. Siwisa. You raised something that is very much have been a conversation even with myself, with a friend of mine yesterday, of maybe we also need to track the history of males in terms of this inherent violence. And many scholars have mentioned that South Africa was built on violence and rape. And that's one of the fabrics of our society post colonization, beginning of colonization. Violence and rape became part and parcel of the fabric of our society. The violence that was exacted to our people by the British and the Boers and the different colonizers. But anyway, we're not having that conversation today. The last question I'll have for you. In our communities, we mostly have also child-headed homes. And you find that these kids are being abused. But there's always been a bone of contention as to how do you report rape when it's not directly affecting you, and where is the boundary? For another example that I'll make, if a friend of mine is being abused by their partner, can I just go to the police station and alert them of this issue? How does the whole situation works out? Because most of the time, or sometimes you find that the victim is in this situation but cannot be able to rescue themselves. Like, for example, child-headed homes and victims that are coming from families where there's no structure for them to be able to report these cases.
Yeah, Isa, I want you to also recall or always understand, the South African Police Service is not working alone. There is social development, there are community structures. Believe me, we've got these structures for a purpose. The mere fact that there is a child-headed family and is not known by social development, that is a problem on its own. The mere fact that there is a child-headed family and the community leaders, by community leaders, I mean your CPF committees and so on, they do not know that there is a child-headed family, is a social problem. These problems must be constantly spoken about by the communities themselves. And I'm telling you, when adults talk to each other, they know the solution. They always find a solution. And the solution is already there. Each and every area has got a social worker that is deployed to work in that particular area. And if, for example, this child-headed family is having girls and they happen to be a rape, yes, at times it may take longer for that rape to be reported because it will depend on their interaction with the community. That is another social problem. Because us as rural people. We are not supposed to be like that, but that's a debate for another day. We're supposed to know umntwana kamakhelwane, their struggles and so forth, because they are also our children. These are things that were stripped off from us, that we will forever treat the symptoms while we do not treat the root causes. So it's difficult to have a straightforward advice when it comes to these issues. And also, number two, you are saying if your friend perhaps was raped, do you have a right to simply go and report it at the police station? That is a legal matter now. That is a legal matter. But let me answer you based on the knowledge I have derived from the research that I've normally, when a person is already in a legal age, meaning is an adult, the expectation is that that person is the one who must come and report the case. Because again, there has been, whether it's dominating or not, there has been instances where even the very, very same victim report a case and 3 days down the line comes and withdraw the case. So imagine now how sensitive it is when you is, let's say, perhaps you are 35, and making an example, you're coming, you're telling the police station, my friend who is also 35 has been raped. I think it doesn't hold weight until that person is convinced that what is being done to her is illegal and is wrong, and there are people to help her. I don't know if I've answered the question.
Thank you, Mr. Siwisa. Yes, we have answered it because of the legal background. Because of time, we have exhausted our hour, and I would like you to just give us your conclusion on in any other way you want to tackle it in terms of the topic you were doing and some of the highlights you want to give us before I close.
Isa, let me thank people who have listened. We need, as scholars.
Mr. Siwisa?
Yes, can you hear me? I can hear you, Isa.
Mr. Siwisa?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Let me call upon all the scholars. We have taken a seat back. I remember when we launched this, these sessions, Doctor, I did have a comment on that day that we have taken, or scholars are taking a back seat and letting societies be led anyhow. We need to come to the party as people who are passionate about writing, about researching, so that our advice does not lack science, our advice does not lack compelling evidence. In that way, we will be able to convince each other, those who are charged with the responsibilities to transform the situation in our societies, on how we can go about it. So scholars must come to the party. When it comes to the rural areas, I believe even people who are listening, some of them may be in leadership positions. We need to talk about these issues, especially in the rural areas. We need to talk about these issues, and we need to engage our institutions. I don't know when last did I see in my own rural area a CPF meeting. Those are the issues. And the police at times will not go and say, establish your own CPF. You need as societies to take charge of your societies and analyze your own situations and seek for solutions. That is one thing that I will say. And I thank the people for the support on this platform. Let's keep the debate going. Rape in South Africa is a serious issue, and gender-based violence in South Africa is a serious issue. And for us as men to take a back seat and think that it's only females who must write about it, who must challenge it, we are then wrong, because we mostly are the perpetrators. I'm using mostly just to be safe. We mostly are the perpetrators. We need to talk to each other. Fortunately, in South Africa, there are already platforms for that. We do need more writers who are males who come to the party and write about these issues so that we can advise each other better with science and evidence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Siwisa. And from my side as the host, thank you very much. I apologize for today because I was on the road, but that's the reality of being a social scientist, that you're constantly on the road. Research is never an ending thing. And also from my side, gender-based violence remains a constant conversation that we need to have, especially now. I want us to look at males as victims. That's another topic that we need to look at, as males as victims in our society in moving forward. And thank you very much to everyone who has tuned in. And from me, it's a thank you from today. Have a safe weekend, sanitize, social distance, and make sure you're safe. The pandemic is still at large, and we have not found a solid cure for it, and our people are dying. So please stay safe. From us, good night.
Good night, good night, good night.